Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see everybody here today. How's everybody doing? Is she acting right? I'll make sure she's acting right. It's okay. I've got my Bible open to Proverbs chapter 31. I will invite you to join me there this morning. Proverbs chapter 31. This is our final class as we think about practical Proverbs for everyday life. At this point, between Sunday and Wednesday, we have touched every chapter in the book of Proverbs. I hope you've learned something along the way. I know I certainly have. This has been a pretty life-changing experience for me, reading through the Proverbs and just letting God throw darts at me. That's kind of how the Word of God is, right? If you read it properly, it ought to come at you and kind of pinpoint the things in your heart that God's trying to expose, that God's trying to redirect, that God wants to inform us better on. Proverbs has certainly done that for me. As we get into Proverbs chapter 31, this is a really interesting chapter for me because it occurs to me we tend to read this chapter in a very specific context. If you're familiar with the book of Proverbs, Proverbs 31 has a lot of information about what we would call the worthy woman, beginning in verse number 10 all the way through the end of the chapter. And we'll certainly spend a lot of time thinking about that in our class this morning. But if you notice the beginning of chapter 31, it begins by introducing us to a new character and to his mother. So here in verse number 1 it says, "The words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him." I just want to point out how Proverbs ends with some very nice symmetry. Here, if you remember Proverbs chapter 1 and how it begins with a father admonishing his son. And now it ends with a mother admonishing his son. I think it's important to see that both parents are involved. Of course, the mother's been involved throughout the process. There are many times the father says, "Listen to my words, also listen to your mother," something I think parents have to say a lot to their children. But it just reminds us, I think, of the importance of both of the roles when it comes to leading families, but also that wisdom comes from both. Wisdom comes from fathers, wisdom comes from mothers, and they're both important. But more importantly, what I want to point out, especially as we close the book of Proverbs, is that we see kind of this return to the parent-child relationship and how important that is. As we receive wisdom, we're supposed to hear it as from a father, as from a parent. And much of the book of Proverbs is written that way, isn't it? It's a parent reaching out to their child saying, "Please listen to me. I want to give you the way to life." And my friends, that's God's relationship with us. He's looking at us and he's saying, "Please listen to me. I want to give you the way to life." And we know, obviously, that our Father in heaven has much greater wisdom than we as parents could ever give to our children. And that's something that's kind of been woven into the fabric of our study here in Proverbs, that God founded the world with wisdom. And he's reaching out to us in wisdom. He's calling out to us in wisdom. And so he wants us to listen to it. This is kind of the divine flow of wisdom, regardless of our station in life. We need to recognize, even if we are the king, as we're going to see here from King Lemuel, we're still subject to the direction of wisdom. And we need to hear wisdom. And so that's what this chapter is really all about. A mother saying, "My son, you are the king. But you can still be changed by wisdom, and you still need to listen to what wisdom has to say." And if you read through this chapter, I hope you did, Proverbs chapter 31, the first 9 verses really focus on the role of the king. And I would argue really the whole chapter is about how a king ought to think about his life and relationships in life. But I want to focus at the very beginning of this class, just thinking about the first 9 verses here. We'll read these out loud, and I want you to let's discuss what you notice from the mother's admonitions here. Let's begin reading Proverbs chapter 31, we'll begin in verse number 2. "What are you doing, my son? What are you doing, son of my womb? What are you doing, son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine or for rulers to take strong drink. lest they forget, or they drink and forget what has been decreed, and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to the one who is perishing, and wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty, and remember their misery no more. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. So this is the mother beginning her admonitions to the king. What do you notice from the mother's admonitions? What are the things that are important to her as she's talking to her son, the king? What do you see here?
That's what is right.
Say that again?
And he does what is right.
Okay, yeah, so there's this very fundamental idea that she's telling him as the king, you need to do what's right? Going back to this idea that we've seen over and over again in Proverbs, there is a right way and a wrong way to live life. There is a right way and a wrong way to think about other people and your role in life. Okay? What other things do you see here that are important to the mother? Kurt?
Verse 8 and 9, I think, help those that are in need, for whatever we can do for them.
Sure. Yeah, there's certainly, it's important to see that in a position of power, the mother sees that it's not for you to leverage. It's not for you to use however you want. When we're given positions, when we're given ability, when we're given resources, we need to see those through the lens of stewardship to serve others. Specifically, what are some of the things that she says there in verses 8 through 9?
For those that can't speak for themselves, defend the rights of the poor and needy. Speak up and judge fairly. Yeah, so you see a strong sense of justice, right? Justice is important. Justice must not be perverted. I think we've read some Proverbs that talk about that, where it says when justice is perverted, people get very confused, and things are not as they should be. Right? Kings and leaders need to appreciate that their role in wisdom is to lead with justice, to look out for people who cannot help themselves. What else do you see here? Yeah, go ahead.
Not to hand over his duties and roles to others, just to be there to do his job as he's supposed to.
Yeah, that's a great thought. This is something that he needs to take personal responsibility for. I think that's something, again, that we see throughout the Proverbs. When you understand what you can do and what you should do, you need to do that, right? I think that's where James chapter 4, or 3 rather, James 4? Well, y'all are going to have to fact check me here. Where he says, whoever knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it, to him it is sin. I think that's where it takes its roots and is in a thought like that. We all have things that we know we can do and we know we should do, but wisdom tells us we must do those things. We must take personal responsibility for our lives, for our choices. We can't just pass things off and say it doesn't matter. When God gives us opportunity and awareness and ability, we must. Especially for people who are in positions of authority. You know, it occurs to me, I was thinking back on some of the wisdom that we're given about leadership. There have been specific sections in the Proverbs that talk about the importance of leaders behaving properly and what it does for a society and the impact that it has on so many others than just themselves. And we believe as Christians that all authority comes from God, right? That people that are in positions of authority are given that as a stewardship. And so they have to use it in a way that benefits other people. We have to think beyond ourselves, but we also have to do what is necessary. I think that's an important thought we're going to see, especially as we get into talking about this woman who fears the Lord, because she understands that responsibility as well. I have things that I must do, and I've got to do them because it's my responsibility. Nick?
Only drink if you're sick or depressed.
Okay. I was really hoping nobody was going to poke at that today.
I got a different take.
You know, this is an interesting set of verses, isn't it? You know, first off, before we get into what she says there in verses 6 and 7, I mean, it's important to note what she says in verse number 5, right? What is the admonition she gives to her son about wine and strong drink? Stay away from it, right? So here is a mom talking to a son, and she's saying, in verses 6 and 7, it seems to me that she's saying, like, look, there's a place for that stuff, maybe, medicinally or to help with certain life circumstances, but as a leader, you got to stay away from that stuff.
Well, Proverbs shows us a lot drinking strong wine and wisdom
Sure.
do not go together.
Yeah. And obviously, Proverbs 23 has a lot to say about that. I'm really disappointed we didn't talk about that whenever we got through Proverbs 23. I'd really encourage you to go back because obviously, in the context of the book of Proverbs, really in the context of Scripture, anytime wine or strong drink is discussed, it's always through this lens of it impacts you. It changes your ability to think clearly. It changes your ability to make sound judgment. And that's really, isn't that her admonition to him? It's not for kings to do this, verse number 5, lest they forget. Right? Their decision making is going to be impaired to the place where they're not going to make good choices. And not only that, the end of verse 5 says, you're going to pervert the rights of all the afflicted. So I think whatever we make of verses 6 and 7, right? Whatever it is that we make of it has to be in this context of, hey, this is something that impacts you, right? And people in positions of leadership definitely should not be giving themselves to this, right? Dennis, you have a thought on that?
There's too many examples in the Bible of what happens when people partake of this.
Sure.
And the implications of it. You can see it in Noah, you can see it in Eric.
Sure.
You won't find anywhere, you won't find anywhere in the scripture that says, thou shalt not.
Sure.
But what it does teach us is this is such an addictive substance that it should not be something that we should be wanting to partake of because of what it does for our judgment and our influence on others. Yeah. And that's what she's addressing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think also it's important to note, the context in which she says, give this to certain people, it's not for their pleasure, right? They're not just drinking it just to have fun and enjoy it. They're taking it to alleviate certain things that are going on in their life, whether it's an ailment or a difficult situation. I'm wrestling with exactly what verse number 7 means, but clearly this is not something we're engaging in for pleasure, right? And again, you've got to align this with what's already been said in Proverbs chapter 23. But again, I think I want to make sure it's clearly communicated. The context in which this is all being said is the mom saying, this impairs your judgment, get away from it, right? Don't do this if you're the king. This is for specific situations. Jake, you have something in that?
I think it's also important to see that it's not in order to manipulate this person to trick them or something else. Because I think that's something that can happen a lot is, we try to drug somebody or get somebody drunk in order for them to do something or pull something over on them or something like that.
That's a great point.
One of the big things I'm seeing through here is an admonition of self-restraint and soberness kind of broadly applied.
Yeah.
And so even
that's a good point.
I don't think this is just end of life kind of deal, but I see some kind of like hospice kind of aspect to this, but it's not in order to trick or manipulate somebody else. It really is more of a pain relief.
Yeah.
Same way.
Well, and I think you made a good point. This idea of sobriety kind of pervades this section. I mean, just before this, she says, don't give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. And then, so she's talking about engaging in behaviors that are going to manipulate us or drag us into things that kind of steal our wits away and don't allow us to make good choices. And I think that can be applied generally. And I would also, suggest you think about what she drives towards in verses 8 and 9. She's trying to help her son understand what you need to be doing is serving others. You need to be aware of the needs of others. You need to be aware of what can be done. And you allow yourself to participate in these things, and you're not able to do that. And I think, especially as Christians today, one of the big admonitions in the New Testament is be sober-minded, be watchful, right? Be service-minded. How can we do those things if we're allowing ourselves to be taken by something that is so powerful, right? Because there's power in what she's talking about in very specific contexts that should not be taken lightly. It should not be taken lightly, period. And I think, our culture wants us to take it lightly. And there's a lot of religious people today that wants to take it lightly. I think there's a very strong warning here for us. Realize the power that this has in our life, okay? Thank you for bringing that up, Nick. You can leave class now. I appreciate that. Anything else you see here from the mother, any admonitions? I'm just kidding. You can stay now. Anything else you guys see here?
She expects her son, the king, to actually listen to her.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? And she speaks pretty boldly, doesn't she? You know, here's a man who has power, and yet his mom still speaks very plainly to him. And it seems like he's willing to listen to her. You know, he writes it down, you know, to share with us. I think that, again, that speaks to some of the dynamics of the relationships that God has given to us and the humility we ought to have. You're never above receiving wisdom. I don't care who you are. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what your station in life is. The mother cares about how her son handles himself in this office, because to whom much is given, much is required. Right? We know that passage is true, and it impacts so many other people. You know, our ability to influence other people should be of a pretty primary concern for us. We may not ever be kings or people in high positions, but we all have a sphere of influence. And it seems to me the mother is saying, you really need to care about your influence in this world and how you treat other people, because that matters. Because wisdom teaches us it matters how we behave. Danny?
Yeah, is he a reflection of her? So if he's out getting drunk or whatever, chasing women,
Yeah, that's
say something about that.
That's a great thought too. You know, throughout the Proverbs, there have been several times when it talks about how this relationship with parents and children are so intimately connected. When the child makes foolish choices, it tears at the mother's heart, right? And the same thing with the sons with the fathers. Yeah, it impacts the people that are closest to you, your behavior and things like that. And again, if we translate that to a much grander scale with God, our Father, how we behave as beings made in His image, if we don't steward our opportunities properly, if we don't handle ourselves well, if we don't represent Him properly in the image that we bear, that pains God's heart. It grieves Him, and He cares about these things. No?
Verse 3, I think this is odd for a woman to say this, but not from a mom.
Okay.
Watch out for women.
Yeah. Yeah, don't give your strength to women.
And if this is, they don't know who this is, but some people think it might be Solomon.
Sure.
He didn't listen to that advice.
Sure.
So we know that his wife turned him away later on throughout his life. And it seems like this was a warning he should have heeded.
Sure. You know, this warning, we talked about it extensively in Proverbs 5, Proverbs 6, Proverbs 7. You know, the father goes kind of into explicit detail about that. And I think perhaps that probably is Solomon talking to his son. And the mother just reiterates that. Yeah, don't go that way, son. You know, and you think about some of the specific admonitions that were given in Proverbs 5, 6, and 7 that we've thought about, where don't look that direction of the forbidden woman. You know, have a monogamous, faithful, committed relationship. You give yourself, you scatter your streams, your springs, right? It says that's going to be death for you. It's going to destroy you even. My son, please pay attention. It's important to see that the parents are in harmony about this, right? And that's how good parenting works. There's harmony in the message that's being communicated. Even though the mother says a lot less, I'm sure this was a lot more pointed as she's looking at him. Pay attention to me. Don't do that. Yeah, good thoughts. Anything else you guys see here? Some admonitions from the mother? Okay, so that's the first 9 verses, but then she kind of shifts the king's focus here in verse number 10 to the pursuit of an excellent wife. So, like as I mentioned, the rest of Proverbs chapter 31 talks about kind of the qualities of this woman that perhaps the king ought to be looking for. But I think there's something larger at play here. Let me just ask you this. Thinking about what the mother is trying to accomplish here, how does this admonition or even this explanation of this virtuous woman fit into the mother's admonitions of what she's trying to help her son see as he's leading in his kingdom? What do you think, Linda?
Well, you mentioned earlier about reflection. His wife is a reflection of him. He can sit in the gate and, know that everything is fine at home. And she's a good reflection on him.
Yeah, that's a great point. That whenever you are married to someone, it's the two become one, the Bible says. And that has a lot of impact on how people view you, your reputation. You mentioned, verse number... in a different Bible. Verse 23 here, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. You know, his reputation is such that that people think highly of him, and a lot of it has to do with her behavior. You know, in the context here, that's the one verse here in Proverbs 31 that talks about the man, and it seems to be implied that this woman's behavior is so good, so exemplary, that it affects how people even look at her husband. You know, I read that, and this thought that you're giving us, I thought about Abigail in 1 Samuel chapter 25. You guys familiar with that passage? There was this woman who was married to a man, I just lost his name. Nabal, yeah, and worthless guy, right? I mean, he was a wealthy businessman. Apparently he was really good at what he did, but worthless guy. And he had a wife who says she was beautiful and discerning. And you know, David tries to come and ask for supplies from Nabal, and Nabal just treats him terribly. And David's about to strap on his sword and come fight against this guy. And Abigail steps in and kind of saves the day. And she saves Nabal's life for the time being, right? She steps in there with wisdom, and she apologizes for him. And she just tries to make things better, even though her husband was a worthless chump, you know? And that's the impact of a worthy woman, someone who behaves with wisdom and forethought. So I think, to your point, this fits into the mother's admonitions, understanding that you're going to be impacted by your choices, especially as it pertains to your spouse. And so choose wisely, because a good wife is hard to find. Right? Isn't that how she starts off in verse number 10? An excellent wife, who can find? She's far more precious than jewels. It's difficult. And I don't think that it's saying that it's impossible. I'm also not suggesting that what is described here is what every woman looks like, but I think it's an ideal that's presented to us, you know, of how what we ought to pursue in our lives.
Especially in the context of being a king.
That's right.
It makes it even harder for him to find an excellent wife because, you know,
Sure.
flattery, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Who doesn't want to be the wife to a king? There's a lot of gold diggers out there. Let's be honest, for sure. Okay, so before we jump in and think about this, here's the other thought I want you to consider with me. So this is the last chapter in the book of Proverbs. And it's talking about a worthy woman. Why might Proverbs end with these thoughts? Because this is the final thought the father wants to leave with his son. Well, I guess the mother wants to leave with her son. And it wraps up everything that we've talked about in the book of Proverbs. Why might Proverbs end with these specific thoughts? Think about what we've considered in the book of Proverbs and how this fits in here. What do you think?
Well, we spend an awful lot of time talking about unworthy women.
Okay.
Now we're talking about the word.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you know, again, Proverbs 5, 6, and 7, this forbidden woman who tries to draw men away, right? There's a lot of, let's be honest, we live in a world where everything is hypersexualized and men are easily drawn away by the ways of women, right? Going back to what the mother said, don't get caught up in that stuff, right? What else, Judy? What do you think?
The things mentioned in the Worthy Woman passage are from Proverbs. They are the virtues that he talks about all during Proverbs.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. There's a lot of echoes of what wisdom is and what wisdom personified looks like. In fact, you think about wisdom is often compared to a woman, right? Throughout. I mean, we just studied on this past Wednesday about how wisdom cries out. It's this woman who has prepared her house, who's prepared this feast, who's saying, come, be with me. But folly is also personified as a woman who calls out. And again, it's in the context of a father talking to a son, so some of that makes sense. But I think 31 in verse number 10, for instance, it parallels a thought we've heard several times. Wisdom's worth is far beyond riches and jewels. And he says here, an excellent wife, she is far more precious than jewels. And so an excellent woman and the companionship of woman, they're both this blessing that you can't put a price on. And they're gifts from God. They're gifts from God. In fact, earlier in the Proverbs it says, he who finds a good wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord, right? It's a gift of grace from God to say, this is something that will help you. Ms. Linda, do you have something?
I think it's important that she should be a woman who fears the Lord.
You know, we talked about that a little bit on Wednesday, how this idea of fearing the Lord just pervades the Proverbs. He keeps sticking it in there at important spots to remind us. None of this matters if we don't see our proper relationship to God, if we don't understand who He is and who I am, and we respect that properly. And I think you're exactly right. it's fitting to sum it up. In fact, that's how it ends. Verse number 30, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she's to be praised. Because that's the way of wisdom. The way of wisdom is understanding my role before God. So not just looking at women, looking at men and women. Understanding our role before God, our relationship to Him, is really what positions us in wisdom. To see wisdom and the humility that we need to be able to receive what God is trying to give us. We have to fear the Lord properly and appreciate Him. Jim?
Just think of this life, besides our desire to serve the Lord, if you have children, who they marry is the most important decision they'll make the rest of their life.
That's right.
She's trying to tell him, listen, it's an important decision. And there is someone out there that's decent and honorable and loves the Lord and fears the Lord. Find it.
Yeah, this decision will impact the rest of your life for sure. I think that's a message I think we need to be sure we're teaching the next generation always is you need to take this very seriously because God takes it seriously, but also realize that God gives us the wisdom to make these choices, right? You don't just need to follow your wits and your whims and your hormones, right? Look with clear eyes at the world around you. And make a wise choice about your companion in life because it will impact. This is contrasted by those other verses that talk about, a quarrelsome wife is like continual dripping of rain. It's an annoyance, but worse, it's destructive, right? There's several verses that talk about you make a bad choice in this regard, your life is miserable. Your life is miserable. Dennis?
Throughout the Proverbs, like you said, it talks about wisdom and folly. I think this is summing up saying this is what wisdom is to her son. And here's the application.
Sure.
We've been talking about wisdom and folly, but these are true applications, not just for the virtuous life, but for the idea of how your judgment needs to be clear.
Sure.
And this is how your judgment looks clear. Don't let things influence your judgment or it'll be harmful. And the same way with picking that virtuous life. Have the judgment to make the right choice. Here's the application. I think that's what the whole purpose of Proverbs is. Here's wisdom, here's folly, but here's the application.
Sure.
Here's a good general application. Use your judgment the way God wants you to use it.
Sure. Yeah. And going back to Judy's comment, this worthy woman is really wisdom personified. And I think it's an admonition for us to look at our life and say, invite wisdom into your life, right? Accept that as your intimate companion. I think that's the language that's used in Proverbs. Let wisdom be that thing that is right beside you because it wants to be. Wisdom cries out from the highest places in the town, right? Proverbs chapter 9. It's inviting us to leave our simple ways. It's trying to act for our good. It's trying to guide us for our good. Everything that's written in the Proverbs, it's not just good things for life. It's the way to life. It's paradigm shifting. And in depicting this in the worthy woman, he's saying that needs to be your intimate companion. In every decision that you make in life, recognize the value of wisdom and its impact on your life, your reputation, who you will be, the way you will go in life. John?
Yeah, I think it stands in stark contrast to all the statements in Proverbs that talk about idleness and slothfulness and looking to the ant for instruction. Because everything about this woman is that she's busy, she's working day and night,
Sure.
She's looking after the needs of others. It's in contrast, like was already said, to the contentious woman, the complaining woman or any of those things. And so, it is saying, okay, here's all the wisdom packaged up and what it would look like
Sure.
in a person that's truly wise. Verse 26 says she opens her mouth with wisdom and the teachings of kindness from her tongue. This is a godly woman. It's not just that she's a good business person or a skillful knitter or weaver or any of that stuff.
Sure.
She's doing this as a follower of God.
As a follower of God. Yeah, you're exactly right. She's empowered by wisdom. It's really what's going on. As we look at, we'll jump in here in just a second, look at some of her qualities, but as I see the qualities of this woman, some of them I see as maybe being opposed to what naturally women might want to be. For instance, it talks about her being strong, and putting on strength. Women don't always think of themselves as strong. In fact, that's not a term we tend to apply to women, right? But with wisdom, she can be strong in her spirit and in her ability, and that's something that only comes from fulfilling the role that God has given to her and applying this wisdom into her life. So let's jump into this section then. So 31 verses 10 through 31, we don't have time to read this whole section, but for those of you that did have a chance to read it, or for those of you that are skimming right now, what is it that jumps out to you or that stands out to you as you read this section about this worthy woman?
She's busy.
She's busy. Why does that stand out to you?
She doesn't need rest. She doesn't look like she needs no rest for the weary. She's always doing something.
Yeah, was there a specific verse that stood out to you as you saw that?
Gets up early and stays late.
Gets up early and stays up late, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. She's constantly involved in something, whether it's in her household, whether it's out in the community, right? She's selling merchandise, she's serving people, she's doing stuff, right? Okay, why do you think that might be given to us as a quality of this worthy woman? Are women supposed to just be busy, busy, busy all the time? Is that what it's telling us? Be careful.
Smart aleck you mean.
Okay.
She's got servants, so all she's got to do is just direct the servants to take care of things. So
Okay, that may be part of it.
anyway, I had a woman point that out too.
Sure. I mean, she certainly has a lot to be involved in. And I think going back to the comment that we made at the beginning, there are things that need to be done. And it seems to me this woman says, I can do them and I must do them. Right? These are things that I need to be involved in and participating in. Miss Linda?
I like verse 25 where it says, strength and honor are her clothing.
Sure.
She shall rejoice in time to come.
Sure.
We wear that. And upon wearing that, it just stating a fact there.
Sure. What is it that you like about that verse? Does that verse give you confidence, or does it kind of enlighten you to the role that you play?
It does give you confidence. Strength and honor are her clothing. That's something she has worked for, something that she has strived for, and she is wearing it very elegantly.
Okay.
And that's what we all kind of strive to do.
Sure. That's an interesting contrast. I'm thinking about the 1 Timothy chapter 2 passage that talks about how women don't need to wear, braided hair, gold jewelry, but they need to have, it's the inward person of the heart, that women tend to be drawn towards the outward appearances, right? I mean, just generally speaking. And I don't think that the scriptures say that that's irrelevant, that you shouldn't do that at all. But I do think, to your point, the pursuit needs to go much deeper than the surface level. It needs to come from a confidence that's settled in fearing the Lord and serving the Lord. Yeah, good thoughts. Michael?
Well, I think, Josh, like business, there's a level of productivity.
Okay.
Lots of productivity.
Sure.
It's not even economic productivity.
Sure.
House, look at every aspect of life, there's this idea of productivity, and I think that's probably one of the curses of our society is our wealth has given us so much time. Even in poverty, there still is abundance of time, right? 8 to 5, right? And we have to think, well, now this is my free time. And now I can sit down in bed and watch TV, right? And so while rest is important, and I think that's why God gave Sabbath, right? Sure. Rest. There's a level of productivity that I think, our society is cursed with time. We have so much time and abundance of entertainment, and we can fill this hole with unproductivity.
Sure.
Very easily. I think that's natural to us.
Yeah. I think you're tapping into something that's important, and that is she's using her time meaningfully, right? Some of the things that are being done, they may seem like menial tasks, but you notice everything she's doing is purposeful. She's helping someone in her household. She's serving in a way in her community that's meaningful to somebody. And so she has this intentionality as she goes about her life that says, I'm not wasting my time. Like, maybe these things seem mundane, but I'm accomplishing something of value because I'm serving others. This woman, to me, seems very others-minded. Do you guys get that impression? I mean, like, she's thinking about her household. Verse number 27, she looks well to the ways of her household. Back to those verses about her service, right? She opens her, verse number 20, she opens her hands to the poor. She reaches out her hands to the needy. She's constantly, even with her husband, the beginning, verse number 11, the heart of her husband trusts in her. Why does he trust in her? Because she's others-minded, right? She's constantly looking out for, again, this is the embodiment of wisdom, because wisdom is always trying to get us to think outside of ourselves and the way that we can serve others. So again, I don't think that this is just for women. I think this is for everyone. But it's embodied. We need to have this sort of thought, intimate thought in our mind that this is the way of wisdom. We get outside of ourselves. We make meaningful use of our time. I think Paul taps into this in Ephesians chapter 5. Make the best use of your time, for the days are evil. That's what he's trying to help us see here. What this woman is doing is saying, I have a very limited amount of time, and so I'm going to get up early before I get too distracted by all the little ones running around and all the other people I got to take care of. I'm going to make meaningful use of my time to serve others because I can and I must. Miss Doris?
Verse 21.
Sure. Okay.
You want to read it?
You go ahead.
No. Anyway, what I'm thinking there is it shows that she is prepared.
Yeah.
She takes care of things ahead of time. She's not a procrastinator. She does take care of others, but she also takes care of herself.
Yeah, she's a very proactive woman, isn't she? She's clearly thinking ahead. Yeah, she's clearly thinking ahead. In fact, I was looking at verses 13 through 16. It kind of captures that same thought. You know, she seeks wool and flax and works with these willing hands. So she knows I need these materials, and so she seeks them out. She's like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. You know, you think about the ships of the merchant. They're constantly coming and going with the things that are needed. And says, this woman is thinking about this thing. She rises while it's yet night, provides food for her household, portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. I mean, her mind is in this place of, what does my household need? Because that's important to her. Right? It's clearly important to her. The verse that you just read, verse number 21, she's not afraid of snow for her household because she's already planned ahead for that. Yeah, she's prepared for that. We got the clothes, the jackets are in the closet because I made them during the summer, right? She's ready for this. Her mind is in a place where she says, I'm not going to wait till the last minute. Because the way of wisdom is not reactionary, is it? It's never reactionary. The way of wisdom is, I know the things that are coming and I'm going to get ready for those things. Because
she's proactive.
She's very proactive. She's thoughtful about these things. Miss Linda, did you have a thought? No?
Oh, I was just going to bring up about idleness in 1 Timothy 5, I think it's 13, where he's encouraging them not to be idle because they'll end up being gossips and busybodies and saying things they shouldn't be saying, etc. So, and it's talking about women there.
Sure. I think it applies to everyone, but I think in the context, you're exactly right. And there's a tendency when we don't have things to do, we just kind of digress into uselessness, right? And the way of wisdom says we're not useless. We don't waste our time. We're not useless with how we handle ourselves.
You know, the very last verse, too, it says, let her works praise her in the gates.
Sure.
So it's not just her husband being praised in the gates for her, but she herself is being praised in the gates. So her work ethic is saying very good things about her.
Well, I think that also speaks to something that maybe we don't do so good a job of, and that is praising women for what they do. You know, men often get pushed to the front because our role in the family, we're the head, you know, and we often have the more visual positions of leadership. Women are critical to the family, critical to relationships, critical to the church. We need to praise them for those things. I think that there's value in that. I mean, that's what it's telling us. Give her the fruit of her hands and let her works praise her in the gates because she deserves that. George, you have something?
Yep, I do.
Okay.
So therefore, whatever she was doing, or whatever we're doing wholeheartedly as unto the Lord. So all that she done, you know, toward her son, towards her, you know, the people within her community. She done by striving to serve the Lord to the best of her. What her desire was to be pleasing to the Lord.
Sure.
So when you put that word fear in there, which is good for all of us to have, but perfect love casts out fear. Sure. She loved the Lord, and her desire was to please the Lord.
Sure.
Her confidence was that whatever she was in need of, He would supply. You know, so I think, you know, last week you said, well, just how far do we take the word, the fear of the Lord? I think you take it all the way to the cross. Because the Lord, He done all that He done because of His love of the Father.
Sure.
He done all that He done because of His love of us.
Sure.
Knowing the fear of the Lord, it would fall on those that did not reverence the Father, that did not make those sacrifices, that did not live a life that was acceptable unto the Father, holy and acceptable.
Yeah.
So I think that fear of the Lord is important, but it develops a perfect love.
I think it's absolutely important. You know, that's why it keeps popping up here in the book of Proverbs to remind us we got to see God clearly if we're gonna walk in wisdom. We have to understand our role before God. I want you to notice all of these things that this woman does. What's the response to this woman? Look at verses 28 and 29. What's the response from those around her? Okay, so there's praises, there's blessings. Her behavior develops these deep and meaningful relationships with the people that she cares most about. Specifically in the home, you see that? Her husband, her children, they appreciate her because of what she's done. And I think that needs to be our response to the way of wisdom, and especially to women who behave this way. Really, wisdom develops better relationships everywhere. Right? When we walk in wisdom and when we walk with wisdom. And that's why the mother ends in verse number 30 with this admonition. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands and let her works praise her in the gates. You know, she's telling her son, look beyond just the external, right? Fear of the Lord will bring wisdom and pleasant fruit in your life, and give praise where praise is due. I think those are important things that we ought to live by. You know, the role of a wife and a mom is often a thankless job, and it can wear people out. But it deserves to be recognized and praised as a gift from God and a blessing to our families. And I think, you know, many of us here have been impacted by worthy women in our lives, women who fear the Lord. So it's fitting for us to praise them for their faith. But more importantly, we must acknowledge God's design for men and women so that we can enjoy this goodness. You know, He's the one who gets the praise for all these things, right? Because God designed the roles to be like this. Without His purpose for men and women, we would be hopeless, we'd be aimless in life, we wouldn't know the way of wisdom. And so reminding us of this wonderful role that mothers and wives play reminds us that everything God does is good. Everything that God does is good. His ways are best, and if we do them, we will have life. And my friends, that's the way of wisdom. That's the way of wisdom. That's where I want us to end this morning. We've studied all this to learn the way of wisdom. The way of wisdom is God's way. It's trusting in His ways, knowing that He wants what is best for us. And He's provided us that direction. So let's not be that scoffer that says, I don't need that. Let's be the person that says, I'm humble enough to accept God's direction for my life. Thank you guys for your time and your study this quarter. We're going to begin a new study next week. I'll have more information for you about that coming up soon. But thank you for your time and your attention this morning.